I'd like to start out by thanking everyone for posting their questions and making this video possible. Let's begin. What was the most interesting fact or story you found while researching your videos, whether it be Sicilian, present-day Cosa Nostra, or the glory days? Although there were many things I've come across and kept notes on, the most interesting was during the early 1980s, when the Coglianesi made their move to take over. At one point, they gathered people loyal to the Palermo bosses and essentially put them on trial in an empty warehouse. Naturally, they found them guilty and sentenced them to death. One guy in particular pleaded with them not to make his death a white shotgun, meaning that his body would disappear. And surprisingly, they honored his wish and dumped his body where his family could find it. As for the others, after killing them, they threw them in the ditch and lit them on fire. Do you feel Scarpa was an American hero for what he did for civil rights? The word hero in my book can never equate to the Scarpas or the Lucianos of the world. What people fail to understand, these were people in predicaments. In Luciano's case, he was doing a 50-year sentence and wanted to get out of prison. Scarpa was exchanging information for money and get-out-of-jail cards. A true hero offers his services and looks for nothing in return, not the mobster mentality at all. In 1957, what should the made men attending the Apalachin meeting done differently not to draw police attention like they did? The two major mistakes they made had to do with lodging and food. Joe Barbara was ordering meats by the hundreds of pounds, 200 to be exact. And being it was a small town, people naturally started talking. In addition, the state trooper, Sergeant Edgar Croswell, spotted Barbara's son, Joseph Jr., reserving several rooms at the Parkway Motel, a local establishment. And he also discovered that the motel's parking lot was crowded with expensive newer model cars. Another mistake was the meeting was originally supposed to be held in Chicago, but Stefano Magaddino suggested it be held at Barbara's house, a costly mistake. They should have had everyone attending bring some kind of food, whether it be cooked or raw, so as not to draw attention that a big event was taking place. As for lodging, those from out of town should have rented rooms far away from that area. But more importantly, they all should have had a driver who, after dropping them off, would take the car someplace and wait a few hours before returning. The cars parked by Barbara's house was a dead giveaway that a meeting was being held there. Well, there are guys in their life that were adamant that their sons wouldn't follow them into it and their daughters wouldn't marry wise guys. I honestly don't know about their daughters, but most guys didn't want their sons involved. Take Chin, for instance. From what I've heard, he was dead set against his sons ever being straightened out. This took place when he wasn't on the street anymore. Then you had guys like Stevie Crea, who let one son follow him, but his other son, conversely, was never even a thought because he's a simpleton. You have to possess some basic intelligence, and his younger son would never cut the mustard. Did Joe Messino rebuild the Bonannos into the most powerful family in the 1990s? I don't know if I would give them that title, the most powerful, but the fact remains, after the whole Donnie Brasco catastrophe, Joe Messino tightened that family up and regained the respect that they lost over the years. And I believe out of everyone, Messino was someone that shocked a lot of people when he began cooperating. Did you ever meet John Gotti's grandson, John Gotti? If so, what was he like? I met him quickly one night at the bar in Mateo's. I was with Joey DiBenedetto, who introduced him to me. But I really didn't know him and couldn't tell you about his character. But Joey told me he was a good kid. A quick story. The wannabe imbecile Peter Pan came to me one day asking permission to assault Gotti, which I nixed right away, only because Joey told me he was a good kid. But more crucially, this kid Gotti would have broke Peter Pan's hole wide open. At the time, Gotti was dating the sister of Gino Gabrielli, and the wannabe Peter Pan wanted to sneak him, with the operative word being sneak because he couldn't face him straight up. Do mob guys ever have to kick up their legitimate income too? I'll quote the words of Matty Madonna after my induction. What's yours is yours, but anything you make off the strength of this, and he pinched his chest to replicate a button, you need to kick up. So the answer is no. You're not expected to kick money up from your legitimate income. Have you ever seen a mob guy stick up for a friend who's not involved in the life, but is getting muscled by another criminal or criminal gang? I've personally helped people out myself. One guy owned a gym, and they broke his front windows, and I put a stop to it with the help of Louis Jet. Since the mob has been brutalized by the government using the RICO Act in the early 90s, do you still believe the mob is the main criminal group in New York City? The answer is yes, and RICO was the tool used to severely damage the Mafia, which, if you follow the history, the government succeeded in its mission. Despite the fact that there are numerous criminal elements in New York City, none are as organized as the five families, and that's a fact. What's the most interesting thing about the life to you when you were in it? Well, right from the start, what amazed me most was the phoniness and treachery amongst so-called friends. Guys like Bubsy, who never had a nice word to say about anyone, would be cursing a guy, and if the guy happened to show up, he'd be slobbering all over the guy while kissing his cheek. Hey, pal, a complete fraud. The backstabbing went on every day. So all of that was interesting in a disappointing way for me. Would you ever consider speaking at high schools or something in that arena? I've spoken to college classes before, as well as a group of people who work for the Canadian Fraud Department, and I enjoyed it and was asked a lot of interesting questions. Everyone I interacted with was very respectful, and overall, the times I did speak were all nice experiences. Here's an email question. You mentioned the time when you and Johnny Sideburns had to sit down with the Gambinos. Can you explain why he said you threw him under the bus? The incident you're speaking about did involve a sit-down with the Gambinos. I won that decision for us, and Sideburns decided on his own to basically let them off the hook. Just to give some insight into sit-downs, you're sent to a sit-down or attend one and represent your family. At this particular sit-down, I was instructed to charge the Gambinos $40,000, and because of Sideburns, we walked away with nothing. The following day, we all had to attend a wake. And Big John, our captain, came over to me and wanted to know how the sit-down went. He knew I would win the decision, but was more interested in the money. I explained what happened, and he gave Sideburns a tongue lashing. Sideburns then came to me and said that I threw him under the bus. So I asked him to reverse the situation and tell me what he would do when Big John questioned him as to what happened. Would he not explain what took place? And Sideburns looked at me and smiled. So it wasn't me that threw him under the bus. He threw our Bogata under the bus. Or as I like to put it, I was sideswiped by Sideburns. Anthony Santorelli was listed at one time as being a member of Frank Lastarino's crew. Do you know if that is true? This was before my time, but Anthony Blue has always been a Bronx guy and usually would be placed in one of the Bronx crews. Frankie naturally is a Brooklyn guy. But who knows? They may have put him in a Brooklyn crew strategically. And for the final question, what happened when you were released from state prison? What are the procedures an inmate has to go through on the day they're released? If you haven't liked the video already, please hit the like button as it helps with the algorithm. And if anyone wants to show their appreciation for this type of content or help keep things going, you can do so by the Super Thanks icon down below or the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. On that day, sometime after breakfast, I was called down to the state shop, and about a week before, I had my family bring up the clothes that I would be wearing out. I believe it was linen pants and a button-down shirt. So while at the stage shop, they took some pictures of me and then handed me the bag with my clothes. They wanted me to check to make sure everything was there, and I had to sign for it. They then took the bag from me and sent me back to my unit. About an hour or so later, they told me to say my goodbyes, which I did with my friends. And then a guard escorted me back to another building where they handed me my street clothes. And I had to turn in all my greens, which belonged to the state. After getting dressed, they took more pictures and handed me a new ID, which said I was on parole, which depicted a picture of me taken earlier that morning. They gave me paperwork, which I had to sign, and also a check for the money I had in my commissary account. And then they walked me to the gate where I could see my family that was standing in the parking lot. My kids greeted me first, which was emotional. But the hardest part was hearing my friends yelling from the windows. I waved but couldn't look at them. I felt so bad and even a little guilty leaving them, but knew their day would come too. Someone once said to me about the feeling of walking out of prison. It's almost worth going to prison to experience that feeling. I disagree. Nothing beats freedom, which we all take for granted and is a blessing.